Zelda is one of the most beloved franchises in gaming. The sweeping sense of adventure, the item-based progression, the iconic characters. It's got all of the ingredients to produce classics, and produce classics it has. Every time a new Zelda game drops, fans are quick to call it the next greatest game of all time. But personally, I was never a huge fan of this series. Whoa, hold on. I absolutely enjoy Zelda games, but they didn't click with me as much as I'd hoped. That was until Breath of the Wild changed up the Zelda formula entirely. It brought back genuine exploration, an open-ended sandbox, a sense of freedom that few other games could provide. I was hooked, but that got me thinking, how would the more linear Zelda games work for me now? Do they hold up decades later in 2025? That led me to try out the system seller for the Wii, Twilight Princess. Is it still a masterpiece of an experience today? Well, yes and no. I'm around halfway through the game and there are some incredible moments, but at the same time, it's got a lot of pacing issues that really affected my enjoyment. Let's dive in more. Twilight Princess was released all the way back at the tail end of 2006. It was a return to a darker, more serious tone for Zelda after the series went for a more cartoony style in Wind Waker. Being a release title for the Wii, Twilight Princess was the system seller, and sold Wiis it did. Twilight Princess sales reached 8.85 million copies by 2015, which was the most for a Zelda game until Breath of the Wild outdid it in 2017. To describe Twilight Princess in a sentence, it is a true successor to Ocarina of Time. Structurally, there are so many similarities. Lots of dungeons. First 3 dungeons to chase a MacGuffin, into another set of dungeons to chase another MacGuffin. Hyrule feels almost nostalgic, with returning locations like Zora's Domain and Death Mountain, each hosting a water-themed and fire-themed dungeon respectively. It hits very similar beats, so if you liked Ocarina of Time, you'll have much to enjoy in Twilight Princess too. Let's start with the good. What I love most about Twilight Princess that makes it unique is the atmosphere. Nintendo really went for something different, certainly darker than other Zelda games, but having just enough levity throughout the game to show the remaining hope left in the world of Hyrule. There's a haze-like quality to the environments that creates this oppressive atmosphere which gives Twilight Princess its distinct look. Story-wise too, the lore is focused. It's not the earth-shattering story that will remain with you forever, but it works well with the setting the team has created. The Shadow Beasts and Zant provide a level of mystery beyond the Ganondorf shtick, and Midna too is easily the best companion in the franchise, being pivotal to the story but less evasive during gameplay than her competition. I actually enjoyed having her around. Her functionality in letting you warp, platform, and give hints adds a layer of gameplay connection that makes her feel more likable than, say, Navi, who just nags at you constantly. As for the gameplay, I actually enjoyed the combat way more than I thought I would. Attacks are very punchy, making whacking away at moblins feel great on a primitive mechanical level. Link has way more combat moves this time around compared to Ocarina, with an execution finisher, shield bash, and more. These moves add a layer of strategy that felt great for the most part, giving you agency to deal with enemy shields without as much mindless waiting that was Ocarina's combat. Enemies too are varied with a good amount of unique moves that encourage you to deal with each of them differently. Sometimes you have to claw shot them out of their defenses, pivot to get around their shield, and use your bow on mobile enemies. It's more dynamic for sure, and I found fighting to be enjoyable almost all of the time. A downside is that there isn't really much reward to the fights though. Like other traditional Zelda titles, I find rupees to just not be that satisfying of a reward that motivates combat. In more standard RPGs or adventure games, the chance of loot, money to purchase gear upgrades, and experience points gives the player strong incentive to fight in order to grow their character stronger. The loop of fighting monsters to get stronger items to fight even stronger monsters has fueled generations of games. But in Zelda, you progress Link primarily through exploration rather than combat. There's no XP, no skill points, just rupees to purchase the occasional upgrade or consumables, which makes combat feel more of a hassle than something that you want to actively engage in. It's just a shame that Twilight Princess has some of the best combat of the series, but not the incentive structure to really make fighting addicting. The best part of Twilight Princess and X Factor is the dungeon design. These are hands down the best dungeons I've seen in Zelda, if not across all games in general. They are huge, visually stunning, and filled with creative mechanics. What impressed me most was just how naturally integrated the puzzles were with the environment. In a lot of games with these kinds of dungeons, the puzzle elements are quite gamey and obvious. Ocarina of Time had these obvious movable blocks and eyes that you had to shoot that didn't fit with the environmental aesthetic. Even newer titles like Breath of the Wild, which I love, have these jarring mechanics that kind of break your immersion. Twilight Princess dungeons though do an excellent job at meshing its puzzles with their aesthetic language. Like in the first Forest Temple, you use your wind boomerang to hit fans on top of bridges to change their direction, or the iron boots in the Goron mines to magnetize onto surfaces, the claw shot to grab onto meshes and decorations in the Lakebed Temple. There's a great balance between aesthetic cohesion and functional affordance that keeps players immersed, but still have enough clues on what to do. The puzzles themselves too are great on a whole. They are multi-layered, complex, and mechanically unique. I just love the dungeon design here. To me, they are easily the highlight of the game and the reason to keep playing. Thematically cohesive, well-structured, and a lot of fun. The bosses too, in my opinion, are some of the better fights in the series. Yes, they still follow the classic Zelda formula of using the dungeon's item, opening a weak spot, and hitting it 3 times to win. But the spectacle here is so much fun. They look fantastic, and even though the structure of the fights is still predictable, the mechanics are woven into the fight in interesting ways. They definitely aren't the hardest or technically complex fights out there, but for the scope of an adventure game that Twilight Princess is, they are great. However, for as strong as Twilight Princess's strengths are, there are some painful issues that are hard to look past. The most egregious is the early game pacing. It's just terrible. For the first 2 hours or so, you will not be exploring or fighting monsters or solving dungeons, no. You will be doing chores around your village, collecting rupees for a slingshot, babysitting 3 kids, fishing, herding sheep. I can see a lot of players dropping the game before the first dungeon just by how tedious this tutorial section is. After the first dungeon, the pacing does get a little better, but then you have to cleanse Twilight areas by going on these scavenger hunts for Tears of Light as Wolfling. There's 16 of these each time you do it, and it sucks. It feels like artificial padding that really didn't add much positive to my experience. I heard in the Wii U remake that they reduced these to only 12 tiers, which helps, but I think these sections are just not good content. Wolfling 2 is kind of neat for the first hour, but he has limited mechanics which makes these sections feel way more of a slog than playing as normal Link. Finally, the platforming is a little wonky. Your options are to automatically hop when you run off a platform and to jump towards Midna during scripted sections. Combine that clunkiness with the limited 30 frames per second, navigating vertically doesn't feel good. It's not a game breaker by any means, but for the great dungeon design, combat, and spectacle, this part of the movement doesn't hold up well. Those criticisms aside though, I'm having a great time with Twilight Princess, even though it's still a step below Breath of the Wild in my books. It's still an excellent game if you can look past the slow intro. I absolutely adore the dungeon design. The atmosphere still feels fresh. The combat isn't particularly complex, but still very fun thanks to some crunchy attack sounds. In 2025, there is way more tight competition in the adventure game space with much better pacing, but Twilight Princess is still worth checking out for the dungeons if you haven't played it already. If they ever decide to bring it back for the Switch 2, please Nintendo, 60 FPS and rework the intro.